Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Lisa Vanderveen, the Director of Enrollment Management at the Willow School. I'd like to introduce today's presenters, both of whom are members of our Willow School faculty. Alicia Zerlo is our fourth grade teacher. She earned a BA in economics from the University of Vermont and a master's in curriculum development and teaching from Columbia University. The majority of Alicia's classroom experience has been in teaching gifted and talented children, and she excels at helping each child at whatever level do their best work and reach their full potential. This experience, along with extensive work with destination imagination and involvement with STEM project-based learning, allows her to bring outside-the-box thinking and creativity into her classroom and to her passion for developing and implementing integrative curricula. Carol Fontaine is Willow's art teacher and also heads up our social studies department for grades 3 through 5. Carol earned a BFA degree from Pratt Institute and her Montessori elementary certification from the Center for Montessori Teacher Education. As an artist, Carol incorporates systems thinking into her practice. She was initially introduced to systems thinking as a discipline by Jamie Cloud of the Cloud Institute when she worked with faculty at Willow. Through the Waters Center for Systems Thinking, Carol has learned at the identified habits and visual tools of a systems thinker, and she continues to look to the Cabrera Research Lab out of Cornell University for deeper understanding. Alicia and Carol are going to speak today about an integrated and comprehensive unit that they've developed this year to help kids understand the complexities of their own identities and the identities of others. If you guys have any questions during this presentation, please put them in the chat directed to me, and we will answer them at the conclusion of the presentation. Alicia and Carol, I will let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Nope. Sorry. Understanding identity is a project-based learning experience. And as you will see throughout this presentation, it is interdisciplinary, incorporating reading, writing, math, social studies, art, and the virtues program. It is also an emergent curriculum, as Carol and I have continually met and continue to meet to evaluate where the students are and plan for the next steps as the curriculum unfolds. The goal of this unit is to help the fourth graders discover their own identities and question their perspectives and assumptions, thus equipping them to enter an increasingly diverse and complex world.
So systems thinking provides a process through which the skills of thinking more deeply, asking more probing questions, and tackling greater complexity are nurtured. Making distinctions, identifying systems, looking for relationships, and shifting perspectives provide the framework for this process. In this unit, each student came to recognize and understand his or her identity as a complex system, as indicated by this diagram. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. This process was not only valuable to each of them, but also impressed upon the students the value of understanding the complexity of others.
To launch the first distinction, personal identity, we used Georgia Hurd's Heart Map. These maps, which were simultaneously used to kick off the writer's workshop, prompted discussions about identity, and we were able to gauge where the students were in their understanding of identity at the start of the unit. Once completed, we hosted a gallery walk, which allowed the students to get to know one another more deeply, but also demonstrated to them that there were many things they didn't already know about their classmates, and that each person's identity was unique and complex. The identity unit is wholly integrated with our language arts curriculum. This novel, The Seventh Most Important Thing by Shelley Pearsall, was not only a great read aloud, which captivated the students' attention, but also its well-developed characters and plot provided a perfect example for our first writer's workshop unit on fiction story writing. As part of our identity unit, the story demonstrated how mental models formed by our experiences can lead us to make assumptions and judge others in ways that are sometimes incorrect, and how the actions we take based on these models can have negative consequences, as they do in this story.
So the fourth graders have been engaged in a project through which each student reflected on themselves, their family, and their relationships within it. These pursuits were directed toward the creation of a three-part identity box. During this process, the students discovered not only the complexity of their identity, but they further understood the factors that influence who they are. We used the art of the American artist Joseph Cornell as an example of how collage and assemblage can be used within a box framework. As in art, the students were asked to consider concepts such as contrast, asymmetrical balance, and hierarchy in designing their boxes.
These are the students' personal identity boxes. This is the first box of 3 on personal identity.
So as the students began their personal identity box, Alicia and I became aware that they were selecting objects that they liked, but really without understanding why. And so we introduced the systems thinking tool, the Iceberg Model. The Iceberg Model is a structure that is designed to differentiate between what is easily apparent, which is the tip of the iceberg above the water, and what is not. So each level down the iceberg offers a deeper understanding of what is being examined. We use this to help the students think more deeply about why they were choosing the objects they were.
So this particular student, you see at the top, she wrote, "Me and my neighbor's dog, Charlie." That was the picture of the item she chose. The how and when it's used, she wrote, "I see him every day in his yard, and I share him with my family and neighbors." But what was really interesting was the deeper understanding she got by using the Iceberg Model. "He makes me feel free and that there is no responsibilities. The life of chores stop and there are no more rules. It is a calm feeling. He reduces my stress or anxiety." Carol?
Okay, so once again, we use the Iceberg Model to help reinforce students' understanding of how their values or their mental models influence their actions. And so here it's important to note that in systems thinking, it's the understanding of the structures that are used in making distinctions, identifying systems, discovering relationships, and shifting perspectives. It's those structures which are transferred. The understanding of those structures are transferred, not any specific content, which is why we can use the Iceberg Model to examine different types of relationships.
So Carol and I realized early on that there was a connection to be made, especially for the Willow community, between our identity and the beliefs we hold around the virtues. To get a measure of of the students' prior knowledge, we had shared discussions, then read about each virtue in our 3-year cycle program, and the students chose virtues with which they most connect. Referencing the 7th most important thing, we were able to have meaningful discussions about how we live the virtues, what our actions say about our character, and how our actions affect others. We integrated poetry, both reading and writing. The students wrote cinquains, a poetry structure they had learned in 3rd grade, and Carol taught them the art of making illuminated letters. To get them to write more deeply, well, I want to share one of these with you. I'm sorry. I'll share this one here. Wonder, curious, surprised, observing, learning, finding, stop and say, wow, amazed. To get them to elicit deeper emotions and expressions, we then had them write free verse poems. which I'll read two to you. Wonder, waves, a gift from God. They cannot be tamed, wondering what will happen next. They are big and small, and when inside, you don't want to come out. It is so mesmerizing, wondering what will happen next. And that is from a student in our class who happens to be a surfer. Giving. If you gave her a ball, she'll play all day. If you gave him a car, he'll drive all day. If you give them respect and kindness, they'll befriend you for a lifetime. Sorry. To spark the interest of our second distinction, we read aloud both fiction and nonfiction stories.
So as we embarked on an investigation of family culture, I asked the students what the word culture meant to them. And they came up with ideas like food, clothing, shelter, religion. And we asked them and provided a wide range of photographs depicting activities in different cultures around the world. And we asked the students to observe what they recognized in the photographs as culture. Before they embarked on that activity, we had a conversation about what it means to purely observe and not judge. And again, we talked about how our own experiences, our mental models influence our perceptions and sometimes blind us to what's really going on. As we had in identity, we identified culture as a system, and we noticed that it's more complex than it seems, and there are different parts to culture. The two main parts or distinctions would be material and non-material culture. And then we saw that within those distinctions, there are further distinctions. So this idea of nesting holes and parts within a system is called the systems jig. As we looked at the components of culture, we asked the kids to think about examples that related to their own families. And we used the categories of product, practices, and perspectives. And as we went through this, the students became very aware of connections among those three categories. For example, if they started with a perspective saying that they believed in God, they went to church, and then moved to the practice of lighting candles, that practice resulted in a prayer. So the different colors of the different arrows, relate to the kind of origin point that they were following. There is no one starting point. You could start anywhere to find a relationship.
I just want to say that these were the ideas that are written around the circle were from the children, and they happened to be remote at the time. And Carol wrote this on as we talked through the different perspectives, products and practices that they were sharing.
Right.
And this is their student connection circles, the ones that they made on their own. Notice the culture key. So to make things more concrete, Carol and I decided to have the students create a visual representation of several aspects of their family's unique culture. The categories we used were holidays, celebrations, foods, passions, treasures, and time together. And the students had conversations with their parents about each of these categories and came back and created these beautiful trees.
So once again, we use the Iceberg model as students were choosing items to represent their family culture. And again, focusing on the relationship between their perspectives, their mental models as the source for or the motivation for different practices and then products. So in this case, we used, again, the terminology from the connection circle that you previously saw. And I just want you to point out the reciprocal relationship between products and practices.
So this was the students' work in creating family iceberg models, and it happened to be around the time of the holiday. So you'll see that we have at the tippy top things that the students incorporated in their boxes: a Hanukkah menorah, Christmas boat ornament, and a diya. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if we look at the bottom, if we go after they, it hangs on the tree, or my family lights the candles, right? It gives us their deeper perspective. So for the Hanukkah menorah, it says the family gathers around, maybe to eat, talk, to celebrate a normal day of Hanukkah. Under the Christmas ornament, we have, so that my family has some joy, even now when it's cold and there's no plants or a lot of animals around. And under the diya, we value God because he takes care of us and keeps us safe. Sorry. And here are their second boxes, their family culture boxes. Okay. In November, we began our first whole class novel, which was read independently. The 100 penny box was chosen because it was at a level accessible to all readers and also had meaningful content. The story teaches empathy and respect for our elders, and most significantly, as it pertains to this unit, it shows how stories are passed down from generation to generation, and also the relationship between memories and identity. During our 2-week distance learning in early January, I introduced the students to Book Creator, an online platform which allowed them to create a memory book of their own. The students collected a penny for each year of their life and wrote about a corresponding event. This was also an opportunity for students to start connecting more deeply with their parents, to learn about their early years and uncovering parts of their identity that may have been hidden even to them. These books were printed on cardstock, bound, and sent home as a Valentine's gift, hopefully someday to be counted as a family treasure.
So I really appreciate the power of Langston Hughes' poetry. And so I brought this particular poem, Antsu's Stories, to Alicia's attention, and we agreed that it was relevant to what we were doing in class. And we thought so because the poem speaks to the importance and a person's need to share their story. But what I particularly like about it is how it recognizes the gift of being able to hear that story.
And I just want to add that our next unit is, which we are on now, is forced immigration, slavery. So all of this actually ties in and sets us up nicely to meld into our next unit, in which we can continue to work on identity.
So before asking the children to interview to learn about their family culture, we felt it was important that the students develop the art of asking open-ended questions that would lead to stories. So I projected a blank template and recorded students' contributions for each particular distinction within culture. Initially, many of the questions they came up with were closed questions. And so we worked as a class to revise them and create better ones. Students saw that many of their closed questions could actually be used as follow-up questions to elicit further information. And we asked that when they interviewed family members, that, well, go on, at least just the next slide.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to, okay.
Yeah, so we asked that when they interview family members, that they ask the same question of more than one member, because examining perspectives gives us a more complete understanding of the dynamics involved when multiple people view a common thing or idea.
So as we were integrating this with our writer's workshop, we were studying boxes and bullets and informational and essay writing. And so I'll just read you, this is a couple of excerpts from the first of their writing about their family culture. All the way on the right, you'll see somebody chose to start their essay with a quote. Like branches on a tree, we all grow in different directions, yet our roots remain as one. That is one of my favorite quotes about family culture and how your family is connected. If you look in the center, do you know what your family culture is? Well, I learned a lot about mine, and I think my family is amazing because we blend several cultures. My family's culture is very important to me and my family because it's an amazing way to help us stay together and relate to each other. And if I can get to this one, have you ever had pani puri, hamburgers, pizza, empanadas all at the same time? Well, my family has.
So genetics was the third aspect of their identity that they were going to investigate. And we looked at both the physical structure as well as the chemical structure of DNA. And I shared with them the periodic table of elements to kind of give credence to the statement that we are all made of stardust. And the mechanics of genetics relies upon relationships and the interdependence of all the elements in the process. And while we often say, heredity is because of DNA, well, DNA is actually not the part of the process that does all the work. It's kind of the command center, but it's other parts that make the process possible.
Ready, Karen?
And because I was aware of the work the kids were doing in math, we looked at the transition or the handing down of genetic material from generation to generation through the lens of fractions and percentages. The kids were very adept at figuring out, how much genetic material they shared with uncles or cousins. And interestingly, I asked them if they could see anything wrong with this particular diagram. And because it is not accurate. And I asked them if they could figure out why whoever designed this chart did so. And they were very quick to point out that the grandparents were misrepresented because each grandparent should have been 2 colors, which meant that each parent should have been 4 and they should have been represented by 8. But for simplicity's sake and understanding, the author of this chart did it this way. And they were very quick to understand that.
So as we were progressing in our genetics unit, we kind of realized that it was abstract and lofty, and also we wanted to bring it down with a greater understanding for the students. And I found some nonfiction picture books that talk a lot about genetics, and they really took on new light and energy for the kids in getting motivated to learn about their traits.
So, and reading the books, the students became aware that even traits are more complex than they seem. So we considered whether specific traits are biological, environmentally influenced, or learned. And going through them, students discovered that actually some of them could be have their sources in more than one category. For example, height is definitely has a genetic component, but it also could be environmentally influenced by the quality of one's diet.
Abersham happened to have created this DNA model for our nutrition unit last year. And she presented it to the class and explained what they had been learning actually with Carol in genetics. So it was a great contribution.
So in art class, you know, art is another language through which children express their understanding and learning. So initially we had the kids designing papers using a whole range of different materials. For the purpose of using those paper strips, which they created, as a metaphor for the synthesis of the different aspects of their identity. And the weavings are beautiful, and they're all very different, as we would expect them to be.
It's been so eye-opening, this curriculum for me as a classroom teacher, because as we begin studying each unit, the students seem to think they have no family culture. You know, they have no personal identity, and it's not been talked about. So it's just a part of their lives. So to actually, you know, put it down on paper or talk to your parents about what traditions do you have? You know, what are your holiday celebrations? It just brings new meaning to them. And the kids are like, wow, this, you know, I am complex. I do have this incredible life. But also I think the parents are becoming more aware of the incredible life they're giving their child, right? Because some of this happens just so, you know, without consciousness, really. And it just brings it to the forefront and it spells it out for everybody. It's really beautiful.
And it's nice that the kids are able to see each other's memory boxes, because then they realize, oh, I'm not the only one who eats pasta on a certain holiday. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, or wow, they eat that on a certain holiday. You know, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we don't have any questions. Everyone's just mulling everything over, I think.
Is this a new curriculum for the fourth grade, or is this what fourth grade has been doing?
This is a new curriculum for the fourth grade. I think the social studies curriculums were readjusted over the summer. And so yes, this is new to fourth grade. And as I said, Carol and I may not have said this, but Carol and I worked over the summer to create the kind of the gist of the curriculum, the outline, but it is emergent. So we meet regularly for, you know, long periods of time to kind of hash out next steps. And then we also talk weekly, sometimes twice a week, to just kind of really know what's going to be the plan, you know, that week in particular.
Oh, it seems amazing. Really robust.
I have to also say the students have been incredible. They, you know, because it's somewhat emergent, we get as much from them in leading us to next steps, which has made the curriculum that much more robust. You know, we had a map, we had a roadmap, but really it's grown tremendously because of the students.
Right. It's really that they're doing it for themselves. It's their own personal investigations. It's not classwork that they're doing for us.
Thank you everyone for attending. We did record today, so I'll be sending the recording in a follow-up email to you all. And you can look out for that and feel free to share it with others that weren't able to make it today. And we'll keep you in mind and keep you in the loop for our next webinar, whenever that may be. You'll know first.
Thank you so much
for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.